The face you're seeing right now belongs to a man who attended dinner parties with kings and queens in 1750. But look at this photograph taken 170 years later. Same face, same eyes, same impossible smile. That's not just similar, that's identical. Today, I'm revealing 8 people like this. 8 individuals who appeared throughout history with faces that never aged, stories that never made sense, and secrets that governments tried to bury. By the end of this video, you'll see the pattern, and you'll understand why they're all connected. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I read every single one. Our first encounter takes us to the glittering palaces of 18th century Europe. But behind the golden walls and crystal chandeliers, something ancient was watching. They called him the Count of Saint-Germain. Or was it the Marquis de Montferrat? Perhaps the Chevalier Schoening. The truth is, no one knew his real name. And that was just the beginning of the nightmare. In 1750, this mysterious figure appeared at the French court like a shadow given form. He was sophisticated, educated, charming, but there was something wrong with his eyes, something that made people uncomfortable, though they couldn't say why. The Count claimed to be over 500 years old. He spoke of historical events as if he had witnessed them personally, kings and queens who had been dead for centuries. He described their private conversations, their secret fears, their final moments. But here's where it gets truly terrifying. Witnesses reported that he never ate in public, never aged a single day during his years at court. And sometimes, late at night, servants would swear they saw him walking the palace corridors, casting no reflection in the mirrors. The Count moved between the royal courts of Europe like a predator stalking its prey, always watching, always learning, always remembering everything. Then, in 1784, he supposedly died. But did he really? Because even today, people claim to have seen him. The same face, the same cold, ancient eyes, still watching, still waiting. What was the Count of Saint-Germain? A time traveler, an immortal being, or something far worse, something that had been feeding off human civilization for centuries? May 26, 1828, Nuremberg, Germany. A teenage boy stumbles through the cobblestone streets like a ghost returning from the dead. The locals found him carrying a letter, claiming he had come from the Bavarian border. But this wasn't just any lost child. This was Caspar Hauser, and his story would haunt investigators for generations. Caspar claimed he had been kept in a dark cell his entire life. But by whom? And why? He had no memories of his past, no family, no identity. It was as if he had materialized from thin air. Here's what made everyone's blood run cold. Caspar was healthy and well-fed despite his supposed imprisonment. He knew basic German customs, like how to buy bread. So who had been taking care of him in this mysterious cell? Who had been preparing him for something? The authorities tried to help him build a new life. For 6 years, it seemed like Caspar might finally find peace. But his past wasn't finished with him. On December 14, 1833, Caspar Hauser was found dying in a park, a deep stab wound in his chest. His final words were about a stranger who had attacked him. But witnesses saw no one enter or leave the area. Some say Caspar was the lost prince of Baden, hidden away to prevent him from claiming his royal inheritance. But others believe something far more sinister. What if Caspar wasn't human at all? What if he was some kind of experiment? A being created in darkness, released into our world to study us, to learn our ways, until someone decided he had learned too much. The truth died with Caspar Hauser, but sometimes, on cold winter nights in Nuremberg, people still report seeing a young man wandering the streets, carrying a letter that no one can read. In 1702, European soldiers discovered something that shouldn't have been possible. Working as a mercenary among them was a man with blonde hair and blue eyes who claimed to be from a distant, mysterious land called Formosa. The man spoke fluent Latin, but with a strange accent that no scholar could identify. He told a horrifying story of being kidnapped by an evil Jesuit priest named Father de Rode, who had dragged him across the world to convert him to Christianity. But this wasn't just any conversion story. This man ate raw meat with his bare hands, spoke in a language that made listeners feel uneasy, and had knowledge of places that shouldn't have existed. The authorities were suspicious, but the man's stories were so detailed, so vivid, that many began to believe him. He wrote books about his homeland, describing customs and rituals that sounded more like nightmares than real cultural practices. He called himself George Salmanazar, but everyone knew that wasn't his real name. And as the years passed, people began to notice something disturbing. George never seemed to age normally. His stories changed slightly each time he told them, as if he were testing different versions to see which ones people would believe. And sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, his friendly smile would slip, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. The most terrifying part? Everything he wrote about Formosa was completely wrong. The real island of Taiwan bore no resemblance to his descriptions. So where had his stories come from? What dark corner of reality had this creature emerged from? Some say George Salmanazar was simply a con artist, but others believe he was something far more dangerous. A being from somewhere else, wearing a human disguise, studying our weaknesses and our willingness to believe in the impossible. The question that still haunts researchers today is, if he wasn't really from Formosa, then where did he come from? In the early 20th century, somewhere in the shadows of France, a man known only as Fulcanelli was performing miracles that science said were impossible. No one knew his real name. No one had seen his face clearly. He was like a ghost haunting the world of alchemy, known only through whispered stories from his terrified students. But Fulcanelli wasn't just playing with chemicals in his laboratory. According to those who witnessed it, he had achieved the impossible dream of every alchemist throughout history. He could turn lead into gold. But that wasn't the most frightening part. Students reported that their master seemed to possess knowledge that no human should have. He understood secrets of the universe that had been hidden since the beginning of time. And sometimes, late at night, they could hear him speaking to someone, or something, in his laboratory. His most famous student, Eugene Cancelliet, claimed he had witnessed the transmutation with his own eyes. But whenever anyone asked Cancelliet to describe his master's appearance, the student would become pale and change the subject. What was Fulcanelli hiding in his laboratory? How had he unlocked secrets that had eluded humanity for thousands of years? And why did everyone who met him seem genuinely afraid to talk about him? The truth is that Fulcanelli vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared, taking his secrets with him. Some say he died like any normal man, but others believe he achieved something far more terrifying than turning lead to gold. What if Fulcanelli had discovered the secret to transforming more than just metals? What if he had learned to transform himself into something that was no longer quite human? Even today, people claim to see a figure in old French laboratories, still working, still experimenting, still reaching for powers that mankind was never meant to possess. 1954, Mount Palomar, California. The UFO craze was at its peak, and believers had gathered for what they hoped would be proof that we are not alone in the universe. They got more than they bargained for. Walking through the crowd like she owned the place was a woman who seemed to step out of a nightmare. She was tall, unnaturally thin, with features that were almost human, but not quite. Her forehead was too broad, her eyes too large and dark, and her skin had a pale quality that made people uncomfortable to look at. She was accompanied by two men who never spoke, never smiled, and never seemed to blink. The three of them moved through the crowd like predators studying their prey. UFO expert George Adamski had just finished giving a talk about beings from Venus, and this woman matched his description perfectly. But when excited believers approached her, something terrifying happened. She would only say one thing. "My name is Dolores Barrios." That's it. She wouldn't answer questions, wouldn't explain where she came from, wouldn't even confirm whether she was human. But here's what made everyone's blood run cold. Witnesses reported that she never cast a shadow, despite the bright California sun. Her two companions seemed to communicate without speaking, and children in the crowd began crying uncontrollably whenever they came near. After just a few hours, the trio simply vanished. No one saw them leave. They were there one moment, gone the next, as if they had never existed at all. Was Dolores Barrios really from Venus, as many believed? Or was she something far more sinister, an advanced scout from a hostile alien race, a being from another dimension that had briefly slipped into our reality? The most disturbing part is that similar sightings have been reported for decades. A tall, pale woman with dark eyes, always accompanied by two silent men, appearing at UFO conventions and then vanishing without a trace. She's still out there, still watching, still studying us. And someday, she might return with more than just two companions. In 14th century Paris, in a house that still stands today, a man was conducting experiments that would make him the most famous alchemist in history. But Nicolas Flamel may have succeeded at something far more terrifying than anyone realized. Flamel claimed to have cracked the secret of the Philosopher's Stone, the legendary substance that could transform any metal into gold. But that was just the beginning. According to ancient texts, the stone could also grant immortality to whoever possessed it. Neighbors reported strange lights emanating from Flamel's workshop at all hours of the night. They heard sounds that seemed to come from somewhere beyond our world. And sometimes they swore they could hear Nicholas speaking to someone. But he lived alone. The most disturbing reports came from people who claimed to have seen inside his laboratory. They described seeing Nicholas working with substances that seemed to move and pulse with their own life. They saw him consulting books written in languages that hurt to look at, languages that seemed to writhe on the page like living things. But here's where the story becomes truly horrifying. Nicolas Flamel supposedly died in 1418. His death was recorded, his funeral attended, his grave marked. Yet for centuries afterward, people claimed to see him, the same face, the same clothes, the same cold intelligence in his eyes. He was spotted in different countries, different centuries, always looking exactly the same. What if Nicolas Flamel didn't just discover the secret of immortality? What if he discovered something worse? What if he learned how to exist between life and death, walking through our world whenever he chose, pursuing his dark experiments for all eternity? Today, there are still 2 streets in Paris named after Nicolas and his wife Pernelle, but local residents avoid walking down those streets at night, because sometime, they say, you can still see a figure in medieval robes standing in the shadows, watching, waiting, and working on something that humanity was never meant to understand. December 11th, 1926. A child was born in India who would challenge everything we believe about life, death, and what lies beyond. Her name was Shanti Devi, and when she was just 4 years old, she began saying things that no child should know. She claimed that her parents weren't really her parents, that her home wasn't really her home, and that she could remember her previous life in terrifying detail. But this wasn't just a child's imagination. Shanti provided specific information about a woman named Lugdi Devi, who had died 9 years earlier in Mathura, over 90 miles away. She knew the woman's husband's name, described their house, and could recall intimate details about their marriage that only the couple could have known. When investigators brought Shanti to meet Lugdi's widowed husband, Kedar Nath, something deeply unsettling happened. The 4-year-old girl began speaking to him as if she were his dead wife, mentioning private conversations and shared memories that no outsider could have known. Kedar Nath, a grown man, broke down in tears. He was convinced that his dead wife had somehow returned in the body of this child. But here's what makes this story truly horrifying. If Shanti really was the reincarnation of Lugdi Devi, what did that mean for the little girl's original soul? Where had Shanti's own spirit gone? Witnesses reported that sometimes, when Shanti was talking about her past life, her voice would change. Her mannerisms would shift. It was as if something else was speaking through her, something that had crawled back from the grave. As Shanti grew older, the memories of her past life began to fade, But she never forgot the most disturbing detail of all. She could remember the moment of death, the sensation of leaving her body, and the terrible darkness that came afterward. Shanti Devi lived until 1987, but those who knew her said she never seemed quite alive. She was caught between two worlds, two lives, two souls that were fighting for control of the same body. The question that still haunts researchers is this: if reincarnation is real, what else might be possible? What other spirits might be walking among us, trapped in bodies that don't belong to them? And what happens when those spirits decide they want their old lives back? Our final story takes us to Victorian England, where a family's desperate hope would unleash something that should have stayed dead. Roger Tichborne, heir to a vast fortune, died in a shipwreck off the coast of South America in 1854. He was just 25 years old, and his body was never recovered. The ocean had claimed him, along with his dreams and his future. But in 1865, 11 years after his death, Roger Tichborne walked into a butcher shop in Australia. At least, that's what he claimed. The man calling himself Thomas Castro was grotesquely overweight, bore little resemblance to the slim young aristocrat who had died, and spoke with a rough accent that Roger had never possessed. But Roger's mother, desperate to believe her son had survived, welcomed him home with open arms. Here's where the story becomes truly terrifying. Castro knew things about the Tichborne family that only Roger should have known. Private conversations, childhood memories, family secrets that had never been shared with outsiders. But he also forgot things that Roger never would have forgotten: his mother's maiden name, the layout of his childhood home, the faces of servants who had raised him. As the legal battles began, something disturbing became clear. Castro seemed to have access to Roger's memories, but not all of them. It was as if someone or something had partially absorbed the dead man's mind, taking what it needed while leaving the rest behind. The most chilling testimonies came from servants who had known Roger since childhood. They said Castro had the same laugh as their dead master, the same nervous habits, the same way of holding his head when he was thinking. But there was something else there too, something cold and hungry that watched them from behind familiar eyes. Was Thomas Castro really Roger Tichborne, somehow returned from the dead, or was he something far worse, a creature that had fed on the drowned man's corpse and absorbed his memories? The courts ruled against Castro, but the question remains: how did a simple Australian butcher know so much about a dead English aristocrat? Some say the ocean doesn't always keep what it takes. Sometimes it sends things back, things that wear familiar faces but hunger for what they can never truly possess. And sometimes, late at night, people still report seeing a large figure wandering through the ruins of the Tichborne estate, searching for something that was never really his. These 8 individuals are just the beginning. What I've shown you today barely scratches the surface of what's really out there, hiding in the shadows of recorded history. Every case we've uncovered leads to 3 more. Every answer reveals 10 new questions. And the deeper we dig into these archives, the more we realize that our world has been visited, infiltrated, and observed for far longer than anyone wants to admit. The evidence keeps piling up: documents that shouldn't exist, photographs that defy explanation, witnesses whose testimonies were buried for reasons that are becoming terrifyingly clear. But this investigation isn't over. It's just beginning. If you want to know what we've discovered about the others, the ones who are still walking among us, the ones who left behind technology we can't understand, the ones whose true purpose is finally becoming clear, then you need to keep watching the Witness Archives, because what we've found next will change everything you think you know about human history. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and whatever you do, don't stop watching. The truth is counting on it.